In just a few nights, the wild boars had started appearing right beside the farmland, tearing up the soil, destroying crops, and moving closer and closer to the livestock area. The tracks they left behind showed clearly that this was not a small group, and if nothing was done soon, the damage would become far more serious. We could no longer keep waiting. We could not allow them to return freely night after night. So we had no choice but to begin setting traps, not only to stop them, but to control the entire sounder before everything spiraled beyond control. We set the trap during the night, deep in a forest along the edge of Texas Farm, the same area where the wild boars had repeatedly appeared over the past several days. The lights only illuminated the necessary movements. Every step was done quickly, but precisely before we left, leaving the trap behind in the thick darkness of the forest. That night, the trap was triggered. The next morning, when we returned, the atmosphere already felt completely different. Even from a distance, the sounds coming from inside were unmistakable. As I got closer, I saw the wild boars trapped after an entire night, moving chaotically inside the confined space. There was no time to hesitate. I began handling them one by one in a controlled and decisive manner, keeping a steady rhythm to prevent the situation from becoming more complicated. The work continued without pause as each animal was collected and removed from the trap according to plan. Another trap was placed along the eastern edge of the forest in an area of tall grass, a location that initially seemed very promising, as fresh signs of wild boar activity were clearly visible there. We completed the setup during the night and left as planned. But when we returned the next morning to inspect the trap, the results were disappointing. The trap had activated, but only a few animals remained inside, while the tracks surrounding the area showed that most of the sounder had managed to escape. Clearly, the location was not enclosed enough, making the boars more cautious and forcing us to rethink our trapping strategy for future attempts. We approached the third trap early in the morning along the southern edge of the pine forest, while the fog still lingered low over the ground. Even from far away, the sounds coming from inside made it obvious that this trap had worked beyond expectations. As we moved closer, the sight in front of us was genuinely impressive. Dozens of wild boars packed inside the enclosure, crowding together in a tense and chaotic mass. Without rushing, we kept our distance and carefully controlled the situation step by step before beginning the collection process. Each animal was removed according to procedure, ensuring the safety of the entire team while keeping everything under control from beginning to end. The final trap was placed deep inside the pine forest beside a water reservoir during the daytime. A location I was certain the wild boars would not ignore, especially since the water source was a place they returned to night after night. Everything was prepared carefully before we left, but even then, I still could not predict what would happen afterward. Later that night, an alert suddenly appeared through the mobile app connected to the trap. The moment I checked the camera feed, I immediately realized this situation was completely different. The number of wild boars inside was so massive that they nearly filled the entire enclosure. They pushed violently against one another, slamming repeatedly into the steel frame and creating a constant wave of heavy noise in the darkness. Without hesitation, I immediately headed toward the trap that same night. As I approached the area, The atmosphere became noticeably heavy. The sounds grew louder with every step closer. Then the flashlight swept across the enclosure, revealing a sounder larger than anything we had encountered before. I did not rush. I cannot afford to. With that many animals inside, even a small mistake could cause the entire situation to spiral out of control instantly. So I kept my distance, watched every movement carefully, and waited for the right moment before beginning the operation. Then, step by step, I started handling them one at a time with complete focus, making sure everything remained under control. The work moved slowly and under constant tension, with absolutely no room for error. And only after the final boar had been removed from the trap did the surrounding forest finally fall silent again. When the last animal was removed from the trap, silence slowly returned to the forest. Everything seemed under control, but when I looked back at the fresh tracks still surrounding the water's edge, I knew one thing for certain. This was not the entire sounder. There were still fresh footprints, still movement paths we had not yet followed, and still sections of forest we had never even entered. This operation may have ended, but the confrontation was clearly far from over. I've lived in Columbus, Georgia for more than 20 years, and I never thought there would come a day when I'd have to guard my farm like a battlefield. Everything started with just a few strange tracks in the field. I ignored them until the next morning when the entire crop was torn apart as if a storm had ripped through overnight. Then they came back, not one, but an entire herd of wild hogs. They smashed fences, tore up the soil, and trampled the harvest I'd spent months caring for. And I realized one thing: if I didn't stop them right now, I was going to lose everything. The first traps were set right along the forest edge, where the hogs usually poured out each night. Not placed randomly, not done in haste. Every location was carefully studied, based on the herd's familiar travel routes. But trapping only at the edge was not enough. Deeper inside the forest, more zones began to be secured as well. Transit points, trails, resting spots, feeding grounds, all of it was gradually brought into the control system. A network was taking shape. We split into teams. Each person was given a role. Everything moved quickly. Once the traps were in place, technology entered the operation. Motion sensor cameras were installed. Automatic target recognition systems recorded every animal that appeared. Every movement was tracked. Every time the herd returned, we had data. No more guessing. No more passive reactions. Everything now was under our control. And after a period of monitoring, we kept bait inside while the trapdoors remained open, watching everything through our devices. When the moment came and the whole herd naturally gathered inside to feed, I looked at my father and knew everything was ready. The decisive moment had arrived. Just one button. The enclosed system activated instantly. Escape routes were blocked almost at the same time. No gaps, no way back. Bang! The drop gate slammed shut with incredible speed. Inside, the wild hogs immediately fell into panic. They scattered, spun in circles, searched every direction for a way out. But every path led to the same ending. A closed circle, no matter how intelligent they were. They gradually lost all sense of direction. Within minutes, the resistance began to fade. No more desperate charges. No more clear attempts to escape. The entire herd was contained inside the trap system. It was over. I looked at my father, and everyone there let out a breath of relief. That same night, reports came in from every other trap we had placed. They had all been triggered, capturing many more targets waiting for their chance to destroy farms and neighborhoods. No one needed to say anything, but everyone understood. After that night, the whole community would finally sleep in peace, no longer fearing their crops would be ruined again. But the most important thing was never the trap. It was the way the community chose to act. The individuals causing the greatest damage were selected first and dealt with through humane, swift, and carefully controlled methods. No chaos, no extremism, just responsible action to avoid unnecessary panic for the animals while bringing real economic relief to local families. This approach was never about wiping them out entirely, but about reducing risk while still respecting ecological balance. And it was true. After that night, silence returned. No more tangled tracks every morning. No more torn up soil after every dark night. But what truly changed was the way people faced the problem. No more rushed reactions. No more isolated efforts. Instead, observe, understand, then act at the right moment. Because in situations like this, the most important decision is not how fast you act, is whether you have enough patience to wait for the right time. Recently, the fields have no longer been as peaceful as before. By day, everything still looks green and thriving, but after just one night, the soil is torn apart, plants bitten through, an entire corner of the garden turned into a battlefield. Overlapping footprints of all sizes. This isn't one animal, but a whole herd. There was no other choice. We had to act, not to hunt, but to protect the crops, to protect livelihoods. The traps were set the evening before. Bait was placed along their familiar paths. Everything was carefully prepared, and what happened overnight meant that at first light today, our priority was to check the traps. The first cage appeared at the edge of the field. Inside was a small group. We quickly noticed something. Their fur wasn't the same, black, brown, even striped. This wasn't random. It showed that multiple groups had merged, a sign the herd was growing, expanding its range. Yet a few more weeks, and this place would become their permanent feeding ground. Inside the cage, they pressed together, breathing heavily, unable to escape. We moved to another trap. Some of the boars inside reacted violently. They slammed their heads into the steel frame again and again. Others behaved differently, slipping to the side, using their snouts to probe each bar, searching for the smallest gap to break free. This is something many people overlook. Not every animal reacts the same way. The steel bars rattled, echoing sharp metallic clangs. This was no longer feeding behavior. This was survival instinct. In another corner, a smaller trap had also been triggered. Inside was a single adult and a few juveniles. The confined space prevented them from gaining momentum or coordinating like they could in the open. This is the key point. You don't need a large trap. Just the right placement is enough to hold even the strongest animal. The result from last night made one thing clear. The traps worked, not by chance, but through careful calculation, placing traps along movement paths, dividing positions, baiting according to the herd's habits. But we couldn't stop yet. The traps remained. The bait was replenished. Tonight will be the next test. Slam. The trap door dropped shut. Both were caught, thrashing inside. A good sign. The herd was beginning to lose its caution at the first point. Not long after, at another trap set nearby, a different adult appeared, larger, more cautious. It circled, paused, stepped back, then moved forward along the bait trail. The moment it stepped inside, slam, the second trap snapped shut. Chaos erupted inside, with its size and behavior. We assessed it as a dangerous individual, likely a dominant, experienced animal that had been causing repeated damage in the area. The final outcome of the night came at another trap point. Two were already caught inside. They continued to panic, slamming repeatedly against the steel frame. But outside, a few others had already sensed something was wrong. They didn't move in, just a split second of hesitation. Then they turned and bolted, disappearing into the deep forest. The sound faded into the distance, leaving behind a trap still trembling. And this is something we have to accept. No trapping system is 100% effective. The goal is to break the herd, to reduce the destruction they bring to the crops. The next morning, we returned together to check the traps. At one cage, several were still held inside. One kept jumping, throwing its full weight upward. Clang! It tried to smash against the top of the cage, but it was useless. Trying to escape, but couldn't. The next steps were carried out quickly and efficiently. We secured the cages, transported all the boars out of the farming area, ensuring they would not return to destroy another night. Everything was done according to proper procedures and legal regulations. The final stage, we proceeded with humane handling in full compliance with legal guidelines. No prolonging, no display, just what had to be done. This is not hunting. This is how farmers protect their crops, protect the work of their own hands. What do you think about this approach? As wild boar damage becomes more severe, what other choices do farmers really have? Everything did not begin at farm, but with the survival of the largest freshwater reservoir in Coconino County. The water source, sustaining tens of thousands of people, was being contaminated day by day. The wild boars poured down like a black flood, tearing up the shoreline, churning the muddy bottom, turning the entire lake into a polluted swamp. This was a crisis, and that was when our rapid response team had no choice but to step in. We moved quickly to secure emergency access permits from landowners around the lake. Immediately after came 48 hours of continuous surveillance. We followed tracks pressed deep into the mud, fresh rub marks still visible on pine trunks as high as 3 feet. Once their routes were understood, I began the free baiting phase, spreading feed for days without setting any trap, building habit and trust. And then, when they had completely lowered their guard, I launched the first strike, a smart enclosure trap controlled by smartphone. Every sensor signal was synchronized directly through the cellular network. Nearly 7 p.m., my phone vibrated in my pocket. I opened the app. A herd of black boars stood feeding beneath the bait station. The screen displayed one command. Do you want to close gate? I held my breath. My finger touched yes. The gate dropped instantly. The entire herd was captured in a single moment. 11:27 p.m. We moved on to control another group. But if you look closely, a few clever individuals had stepped back at the exact moment the gate was about to fall. They had learned their first lesson, and from now on, everything would become far more difficult. The remaining group had become extremely cautious. They now avoided any narrow structure completely. I had to manipulate their instincts. Through space itself, at an open clearing near the forest edge, I built a large corral trap, assembled from heavy-duty steel panels. The key was in the design, 2 wide drop gates placed in different directions. Wild boars are naturally suspicious, but an open space with multiple exits can deceive their survival instincts. They believed it was only a natural feeding ground, a place where escape was always possible. And just as predicted, the herd lowered its guard and slowly moved deeper into the center of the trap. The moment had come. I hit the trigger. 2 massive steel gates slammed down at once. Every path of retreat vanished in an instant. Caught without warning, the boars erupted into panic. They scattered wildly, crashing into the mesh walls with sharp, violent sounds. The chaos in the air was enough to tense anyone watching. After the herd was split apart, the most cunning core group drifted to an open grassy slope not far from the reservoir. The trap there was built from multiple sections of reinforced tubular steel fencing, with no roof overhead. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary livestock pen from a farm. We spread a heavy layer of corn directly in the center and waited patiently. The signal came through. A herd of more than a dozen wild boars, of every size and color, was packed inside. The golden opportunity had arrived. The release command was triggered remotely. Immediately, the entire frame shook violently under the force of their impact. But the circular linked structure dispersed the shock perfectly. Not one weak point, not one escape route. After 2 consecutive full herd captures, the main group, destroying the water source, had finally been taken. The operation continued, pushing the survivors deeper into the forest where no electrical grid existed. With no other option, we deployed a corral trap integrated with solar power. Its self-sustaining energy source quietly kept cameras and the automatic feeder running for weeks on end, steady, silent, like an invisible trap. No human scent, no engine noise. The long silence slowly eroded their instincts to be cautious. 8:02 a.m. Under the first sunlight of morning, an entire group of sows led their piglets in, feeding beneath the hopper. The decisive moment. The image recognition system instantly locked onto the target. The gate slammed shut. The animals inside bolted in panic, while a few left outside escaped. Everything happened in a split second. The mission neared its end on the dry plain beside the lake. The giant patented circular trap from Jaeger Pro was deployed like a fortress, determined to capture the last herd and deny them any chance to return and destroy again. The monitoring screen showed a sight that made me stop breathing. A massive herd of wild boars, black as night, was cautiously entering the trap zone. More than a dozen animals stepped one by one past the gate threshold, unaware that danger was waiting above them. 2 heavy steel gates crashed down, thanks to the circular design that eliminated every blind corner. The strength of the boars became meaningless. The final mission was complete. The next morning, we drove out in our Ford trucks to each trap site. Moving wild boars from the steel enclosure into transport trailers demanded patience and perfect coordination. Because of their untamed nature, the animals were highly restless, so we used sound cues and portable barriers to guide them safely into the trailer compartments. Once secured, they will be transported to a designated management area, helping protect the water supply and restore balance to the local ecosystem. Controlling invasive wildlife in America is not about brute force alone. It is a battle of intelligence powered by technology. Every trap, every touch on a smartphone screen is the result of careful behavioral study. Only decisiveness and modern innovation can truly protect the peace of farms and the balance of nature. As a field coordinator with the Arizona Wild Boar Rapid Response Team, I have faced countless critical situations, but the chain of events that unfolded recently on the suburban edge still stays with me. Heavy steel structures shook violently. The ground trembled beneath the force of tons of muscle. It all began when cornfields were flattened, driving wild boars out of the fields and into residential areas. 8 a.m., an emergency video was sent to the control center. In the middle of a busy street, an aggressive wild boar suddenly charged out and attacked a pedestrian head-on. It was violent, terrifying, and unbelievably fast. After the dangerous animal was brought under control, Our immediate assessment was clear. Food sources in the nearby dry hills had likely been exhausted, forcing the boars down into the neighborhood in search of food. The situation was critical. I ordered all trail access points sealed and launched a full-scale control operation on the hillside above the town. Before any trap could be placed, the technical team spent hours tracking signs. Fresh hoof prints in soft mud, tree bark torn apart, deep-rooting marks along the forest edge. Everything pointed to the presence of a large sounder. Once the movement route was confirmed, I authorized deployment of a hexagonal drop trap built with a reinforced steel frame. Size: 6.6 feet, 9.8 feet, built as a reconnaissance setup. To test reactions and estimate the density of the lead group. 11:24 p.m., the camera captured 2 boars, each around 88 pounds, entering the center zone. I immediately triggered the trap. The gate dropped. Both targets were secured cleanly. But through the infrared screen, I could still see larger shadows lingering outside the perimeter. They were too cautious to enter such a tight enclosure. We had moved too quickly. I changed tactics. This time, a box trap made from high-strength aluminum alloy. Size: 4.9 feet, 8.2 feet, fully enclosed, designed to deceive visual suspicion. The target now was not the whole group, but oversized solitary boars with aggressive behavior. Those were the individuals posing the most immediate threat to nearby residents. Around 2 a.m., a giant boar appeared. Estimated weight: nearly 660 pounds. It stepped inside cautiously, then began devouring the fermented corn bait. The trap was triggered. The beast was locked inside. It slammed wildly against the aluminum walls, creating violent metallic crashes. The final solution was deployed: the circular elevated trap. Diameter: 32.8-foot frame. Heavy tubular steel covered with ultra-durable mesh. The entire system was suspended 3.9 feet above the ground by electric winch cables. Its open design made the boars drop their guard. We spread fermented grain in a wide circle beneath the center of the trap. At the transition zone between the hills and town, the giant black trap finally showed movement. Around 10 boars entered in a crowded rush. They shoved, competed, and fed greedily, completely unaware that the trap was already waiting above them. Once the entire group was inside, I pressed the remote trigger. The steel frame dropped free. The system locked instantly. The whole sounder was contained inside the circular barrier. Everything seemed calm until the next morning. Around 8 a.m., one of my teammates called in urgently and told me to check the camera feed immediately. I could hardly believe what I saw. A dense group of wild boars had entered the smaller trap. This version was smaller than the black trap from the night before, but the results were astonishing. I triggered it immediately. No chance to escape. The boars ran in panic, circling desperately, searching for a gap. But the steel structure had sealed every exit. The direct threat to the residential area was officially removed. We loaded into the Land Rover Defender and headed straight to the site. A pickup truck was backed carefully against the trap gate. Using a long guiding pole, we directed each animal into the transport vehicle one by one in an orderly way, minimizing panic as much as possible. In cases where an individual was excessively aggressive and posed immediate danger to the team, humane on-site action was taken to ensure total safety. Watching each animal brought under control and loaded out, a deep sense of relief spread across the team.
Yep.
Controlling wild boars is a test of patience and strategy. From reading signs in the dirt to adapting trap systems in real time, every move must be calculated. Only by understanding their behavior and how they react can we intervene effectively and restore peace to the community. By daylight, this field may still look normal, but after just one night, by the next morning, the soil has been torn apart in patches, roots ripped upward, empty spaces left behind as if something passed through and swept away every ounce of hard work. What worries them is not only the scale of destruction, but the fact that it returns almost every night, consistent, relentless, and unpredictable. And that is the sign that if no action is taken in time, an entire harvest could disappear. That is exactly why our team is here again, to install traps strong enough and solid enough to hold the line. Without wasting time, we completed the first net trap that same day on the southern edge of the forest. Before long, it gave its first signal. One boar had been caught inside, but instead of staying contained, it reacted violently, charging straight into the netted gate again and again. The mesh stretched tight, shaking wildly with every impact. The decision was made immediately after that. We would not dismantle the old trap, but we would no longer rely on this type of system. At once, on the northern side of the forest, where the terrain was tighter and more enclosed, a different setup was built. A steel door trap, heavier frame, stronger locks, a gravity drop gate that did not depend on tension like netting. It only needed to be strong enough to withstand a direct hit from a herd of wild boars. When everything was ready, we waited in silence for nightfall. The tension in the air was so thick that no one said a word. Then the first movement appeared. The smell of bait quickly drew in the herd. And when the moment came, when every last one had stepped inside, click, the trigger was activated. The gate dropped shut. Inside, several boars reacted instantly. They burst into frantic motion, searching for an escape. But every direction was sealed. Metal rang out in sharp beats. Short, clean, final. We looked at one another. For the first time, the trap had worked exactly as intended. At another point near the forest edge, the reinforced trap set by Tom did not take long to activate either. Though it caught only a few, it would still reduce the damage to this season's crops for the local farmers. Once the trap was sprung, the boars tried to escape by instinct. But that was impossible. They had been fully contained inside the solid structure we had spent so much effort preparing. And did not stop there. Texas is home to more than 3 million feral hogs. So together with landowners, we often place traps like these out in the fields. The trap in this area became another hotspot, stirring up noise at the edge of the woods. When large, powerful boars were found contained inside, it proved one thing clearly. The system was working exactly as we had planned. Every time a trap was triggered, we did not rush to celebrate, but at the very least, everyone felt a little more at ease. The traps continued to be reinforced. We continued the control operation. This time, we were determined to catch every last one, to leave them no chance to damage this area again. Every year, our state of Texas alone suffers around $400, $500 million in economic losses caused by wild hogs. This final night was considered the decisive one. Once again, we took our positions, held our breath, and waited. At the first trap, the herd had grown larger. Not only adults, but smaller ones as well entered the enclosure. The space inside began to tighten. Then, at the perfect moment, the trap let out a chilling clack. Instantly, movement inside became faster, more violent, more desperate. Heavy blows slammed into the steel frame. Metal rang out sharply. Others circled and shoved. The entire trap shook in waves. But this time, just like the night before, not a single one escaped. We kept watching, kept waiting, and then everything reached its peak. A massive herd appeared, not scattered individuals anymore, but a dense, moving flood. They fed greedily on the bait scattered across the ground until BM, the gate crashed down. At once, the trap exploded with noise inside. Feet pounding the dirt, steel bars rattling without pause. And in that moment, we understood more clearly than ever. If the trap system had not been strong enough, everything would have burst apart. The next morning, we did not dismantle the trap right away, because we knew there was still more out there, and we were right. Another large herd had been caught just before dawn. When we walked past, they became even more agitated. Several slammed into the steel frame so hard the entire trap shook repeatedly. And do you know what was inside that cage? The very reason those fields have been destroyed for weeks. As everything gradually came under control, the farm grew quiet again. No more fresh tracks each morning. No more furrows torn open after every night. This was not a hunt. This was the only way to save the harvest. Because once wild boars discover a stable food source, they do not stop on their own. In situations like this, what do you think matters more? A trap strong enough, or the patience to wait for the perfect moment? Leave your thoughts below. This time, I moved to another area in Arizona, a place where sparse forest blends with dry, barren ground, and wild boar tracks appear heavily concentrated around the few remaining water sources. Why are they gathering here in such large numbers? Was turning this place into a new hotspot? And are they beginning to adapt in ways that make ordinary traps less effective? Those warning signs were exactly what forced me to start trapping here immediately, before the situation became even harder to control. I decided to set a total of 5 traps, and the first one was placed in an open clearing deep in the woods, an area covered with fresh signs of wild boar activity. After finishing the setup and spreading bait, I left to continue placing the remaining traps in other locations. The work lasted for hours, but throughout the entire process, I couldn't stop thinking about that first trap, wondering whether it would actually work as planned. When I finally returned, I could already tell from quite a distance that something had happened. The silence that normally covered the area was now broken by loud, chaotic noises coming from the direction of the trap. And as I got closer, the sight in front of me genuinely caught me off guard. Inside the trap, an entire group of aggressive wild boars had been captured. They shoved against one another, moving wildly in panic. But no matter how violently they reacted, they still couldn't escape. The second trap had been placed right beside the forest edge. After checking the first trap, I could barely wait any longer and immediately headed toward the second location. The moment I got close, I realized something was wrong. The wire mesh surrounding the trap was shaking violently in the stillness of the forest. As I moved closer, the scene became clear. A pair of wild boars was trapped inside, thrashing around desperately while trying to escape. They slammed repeatedly into the fencing, spinning around inside the confined space and creating sharp, tense bursts of noise. But despite how aggressively they reacted, the trap continued to hold them firmly inside. That day had already been more than enough, so we decided to stop and leave the remaining traps unchecked until the following morning. As darkness fell, wild boars slowly began emerging from the woods, following the scent of bait into the traps through the silence of the night. When we returned the next morning, I almost froze at the sight in front of me. The number inside had increased dramatically. It was no longer just a handful of boars like before. Now there were dozens packed tightly together inside the confined space. They moved chaotically, creating relentless crashing sounds that made the atmosphere feel more intense than ever. Another trap showed clear signs that a large number of boars had entered during the night. The tracks and damage left inside proved that the original group had been much bigger. But when we checked the trap the next morning, the scene was completely different. Only 7 boars remained inside. It was obvious that most of them had escaped. The signs around the area showed that they had actually leaped over the fencing to break free, something I never expected them to do so easily. That alone proved these wild boars were not only numerous, but also incredibly strong and extremely reckless. The final trap turned out to be the biggest surprise of all. It had been placed in the middle of an exposed clearing, a location where I honestly didn't expect much because there was almost no natural cover around it. But when we checked it, the result was the complete opposite of what I anticipated. Inside was an entire herd of wild boars, both fully grown adults and smaller juveniles, crowded tightly together inside the trap. Clearly, they had let their guard down in a way I never expected, and that was exactly what turned this trap into one of the most successful locations of the entire operation. After finishing the inspection of every trap, I stood still for a moment and looked back across the vast area surrounding us. This time, the results went far beyond my expectations, not only because of the numbers, but because of how the wild boars were adapting and reacting. Some traps worked perfectly, but other situations revealed something far more concerning. The boars were becoming bolder, more unpredictable, and much harder to control. And that made me realize one thing clearly. Even though we achieved results today, this confrontation is far from over.
It didn't begin in the fields or at the forest edge. It began right inside the working heart of the farm. A herd of wild boars appeared in the very spaces where people carry out their daily lives. What they left behind were overturned tables and chairs, damaged equipment, and a workplace thrown into chaos. And when wild boars grow so accustomed that every time they appear, they walk straight into human workspaces, this is no longer a story about crops. It is a clear sign that the control system has reacted more slowly than the boar's ability to adapt. The moment had come for us, those entrusted with protecting the peace of this land, to act decisively. Shall we go then? The most common mistake in wild boar management is not a lack of tools, but poor timing and flawed execution. Set a trap along the wrong route, trigger it too early, or let even a single animal escape, and the entire herd will remember what happened. From that moment on, they grow more alert, alter their movement patterns, and become willing to push deeper into human spaces. When this happens, any reaction driven by impulse or emotion risks pushing the situation completely out of control. In this situation, the goal is not to chase the animals away, certainly not to cause panic. The top priority is to stop the herd from continuing to access the work area, prevent them from scattering in multiple directions, and avoid creating additional risks for people. The chosen solution is a large coral-style trap integrated with a remote monitoring camera system. This tool allows decisions to be made based on real data, not guesswork. The camera clearly identifies the size of the herd, their approach routes, and the exact moment when the boars are least alert. In wildlife control, accurate information is just as important as the trap itself. Automatic cameras are positioned along multiple approach routes around the trap, covering the entire movement zone of the boar herd. This setup is not about catching more animals. It is about minimizing risk to people. Every decision is based on real-time visual evidence, with no guesswork and no rushed reactions. Only when the entire herd is fully within the safe control zone is the system activated. When the cameras confirm that the entire herd is inside the trap, the system is activated remotely. The automatic drop mechanism seals all exits in an instant, containing the herd within a closed, fully controllable space. No individual panics and escapes. No movement spills over into areas where people live and work. The risk is stopped exactly at the point of intrusion. This is the fundamental difference between technology-based control and traditional manual methods. Instead of relying on a single trap, the system is deployed across multiple strategic points. Known travel routes, areas near food sources, and access points close to farm structures. This approach prevents the herd from scattering in multiple directions, reduces pressure on any single trap, and increases overall control of the entire area. It is a long-term control strategy, well suited to farm environments where people live and work on a daily basis.
They're looking.
A single small mistake in trap placement can turn a controlled situation into a serious threat to the entire farm. Once wild boars cross into restricted areas, what matters most is not reacting the fastest, but reacting with precision. Technology, timing, and disciplined decision-making allow risks to be contained responsibly, before people are forced to pay a heavy price. This is not just about controlling wild boars, it is about protecting safety, order, and the daily rhythm of an entire community, effectively and without unnecessary strain on human effort. You might think this is a nature reserve, but it's not. This is Rome, the capital of Italy. These wild boar families are strolling through crowded neighborhoods as if they were the true owners of the streets. With an estimated population in the millions across Italy, wild boars are rapidly losing their fear of humans. Urban waste has become an easy food source, turning them into a serious threat to traffic safety and daily urban life. What's happening in Rome is a preview of what many suburban areas around the world are beginning to face, as the boundary between city and countryside slowly disappears. So, what's the answer to this growing problem? Instead of mass culling, many countries are choosing more sustainable population management strategies. Most notably, live capture trapping followed by professional handling. One of the most effective tools is the vertical guillotine-style trap. To outsmart such an intelligent animal, experts scatter corn and sweet potatoes along established trails for several days. This builds familiarity and a sense of safety before the trap is ever activated. Take a close look at the trap's design. The frame is welded from heavy-duty angle steel and round bars, strong enough to withstand the full force of an adult boar's charge. The guillotine door hangs above the entrance and, once triggered, drops straight down along steel rails, sealing the trap in a split second. Using either manual pull systems or remote triggers, operators aim to capture the entire sounder, not just individual animals. The door is only activated once the whole group is fully inside. This method prevents scattered survivors from learning, adapting, and returning to cause more trouble later. While box traps work well for smaller groups, areas with heavy wild boar pressure require a more flexible solution, the corral trap. With its large open space, this trap allows for mass capture without making the animals feel cornered, reducing panic and stress. Corral traps are typically set in pastures, forest edges, or heavily damaged agricultural zones. Thanks to their ability to capture entire herds in a single operation, corral traps are considered one of the most effective tools for large-scale wild boar management, protecting crops while meeting humane standards. Another option includes open-top enclosures that create a sense of openness, lowering the boar's natural suspicion. The key lies in the door systems, either one-way entrances or remotely triggered gates, allowing the entire herd to enter freely before closure. Choosing the right trap, placing it in the right location, and activating it at the right moment are critical to success. Not every situation requires herd capture. For isolated boars appearing in gardens, farms, or residential yards, single catch traps offer a simple and cost-effective solution. While they're not suitable for population explosions, they're highly effective for protecting individual properties. From simple cage traps to complex corral systems, each method plays a specific role in an overall wildlife management strategy. Whether the goal is protecting crops, neighborhoods, or ecosystems, the common thread is restoring balance between humans and nature. After a successful capture, the next step is safe handling and transport. Since large traps are usually fixed in place, wild boars are guided into smaller transfer cages, reducing struggle and minimizing injury risk. Depending on local wildlife regulations, suitable animals may be relocated to controlled zones, while others are handled using approved humane methods. As transport trucks roll away from residential areas, peace is restored for local communities, bringing a responsible control operation to a close. These traps are more than technical tools. They're proof that humans can learn to coexist with wildlife, rather than constantly confront it. In suburban areas, controlling wild boars isn't about using the strongest trap. It's about using the right tool for the right situation. When intervention is timely and well-planned, conflict can be prevented before it turns into a crisis. That's how communities can live more safely alongside a changing natural world.